Happy holidays from One Mind Syndicate. I am your host Gersh1, and today we're going to be talking about Forge Worlds in the Imperium of Man. I finally did it. You guys have been asking for longer lore videos, and I created an hour-long compilation video of all of the Forge Worlds we've covered so far. Hopefully this helps you guys paint or, build whatever it is that you need to do in order to bring that pile of shame down during this small little holiday vacation. Hopefully this video helps you out. Let's get started first with talking about what a Forge World is. Unlike the other planets ruled over by the Imperium of Man, Forge Worlds are the domain of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Different in so many ways, the AdMech exists as a part of humanity while simultaneously being something completely unique, both culturally and militaristically. If you're a complete newcomer to the 40K universe, I would suggest that you check out our 40 facts and lore on the Adeptus Mechanicus, as this video will explore the symbiotic relationship with the priesthood of Mars and the rest of the Imperium. That will give you an understanding of today's very important topic, the major Forge Worlds of the Imperium of Man. These planets are superpowers, not just within the Imperial space, but also the entire galaxy. Think of every single Forge World we will talk about today as extensions of the Red Planet. These worlds have the power to rule over and defend entire sectors and still have enough resources to send out military help all across the galaxy. Attaining such an incredible position in the grand scheme of things is no easy task, and as we cover the lore of the major Forge Worlds, we will be learning about how many trials and tribulations each Forge World had to go through in order to obtain control. Now let's kick things off with the main Forge World, the Forge World of Mars. Greatest amongst the Forge Worlds of the Adeptus Mechanicus is the planet of Mars, the Red Planet. Situated in the Sol system, it is the birthplace of the Cult Mechanicus and the seat of its highest power. Mars is the fulcrum upon which the religious, political, and military might of the Tech Priest turns, its importance to the Imperium second only to its sister world of Holy Terra. Mars is the original Forge World. It is a planet given over in ages past to holy industry on an unprecedented scale. Ancient hollow reliquaries paint a picture of an isolated and terrifying era. Long before the Imperium, civil wars and unnamed disasters left Mars an irradiated wasteland, its frigid and toxic atmosphere unbreathable. A surviving culture underground relied heavily upon the remaining technology, so much so that its use and maintenance became ritualistic. Technology became synonymous with life, and their machine god with human survival. On Mars' surface, rust-red deserts of metal particles blow alongside the fringes of vast secretions of soot and chemical-strained metropolises that encompass entire tectonic plates. Crackling capacitor banks the size of cities churn the thick and spoiled atmosphere, creating localized storms so persistent that they gain their own names. Pollutants billow out from mile-high stacks emblazoned with technoglyphs and emitters that blare binary canticles in the praise of the Omnissiah. The ceaseless din of divine creation reverberates through the ground while plumes of cinder and spark gush from the huge volcano-like vents. This is the perfection created by the Adeptus Mechanicus, and Mars' preeminence has seen its likeness remade in praiseworthy imitation time and time again across the galaxy. The Tech Priests throughout the Imperium are referred to collectively as the Priesthood of Mars, such as the planet's central role in their religion and internal politics. It is considered the holiest place of pilgrimage for the adepts of the Cult Mechanicus, who are moved to rapture by the solar collective fields of Arcadia, their optics clicking furiously at the spiral glory of Tantalus Hive and the rearing majesty of Olympus Mon, wherein resides the Fabricator General of Mars. As political and religious ruler of the Red Planet, the Fabricator General is ex officio head of the Adeptus Mechanicus and holds a permanent position as one of the High Lords of Terra. It's important to note that all Forge Worlds owe nominal fealty to Mars, and its ruler is vested with a divine right over all others, judging on matters of doctrine and legitimizing connective articles of trade. Few, however, slavishly submit to the Red Planet's superiority. Discoveries of ancient techno-arcana are often hidden rather than revealed to the Martian eyes. Schisms in theology and competition for resources can mar relationships for centuries, and on occasions small wars have even broken out between the different Forge Worlds. And Mars itself isn't homogeneous. Subsectors conduct treacherous research or plot for power, hacking rival power cells, annexing territory, or appropriating assets. Most Forge Worlds, though, solemnly respect the Red Planet's historical primacy. Many include the elements of their livery and their own attire as a tactic recognition of their power, whether genuinely felt or not, and Mars is viewed as speaking with the authority of the machine god. Thus, its Fabricator General is well versed in the complex and aggressive factionalized interest, making their position on the Council of the High Lords relatively secure against assassination, coercion, and deception. Surrounding Mars and incorporating the moon of Phobos is a circlet of interlinked dockyards, orbital transfer hubs, atmospheric scrubbers, and toxic refineries too dangerous even to allow on the red planet's abused surface. Comprising of many other installations including survey outposts and formidable defense platforms, this ring of iron is most notable for the huge warships and other large starfaring constructs that are built alongside its length in gigantic suspended docks. Mars does what most Forge Worlds do and maintains its own Skitarii forces to protect its interests, annihilating the enemies of the Tech Priest and to fight as the vanguard of the quest for knowledge. These obedient warriors create a constant buzz of static psalms. These are holy rites to the Omnissiah as they march forward. The Red Planet counts among its empire more subservient industrial worlds and Forge Moons than any of its peers. The great trail of machinery, ammunition, and technological wonders flow between its holdings. Now let's move on to one of my favorite Forge Worlds, Forge World Metallica. The gleaming giant of the Ultima Segmentum is the Forge World of Metallica. Metallica is a planet sheathed entirely in adamantium, iron, and steel. Its surface is covered with immense interconnected industrial clusters and forge shrines interspersed with landscapes of industrial waste. It is an unsleeping crucible of war production, whose polluted skies ring to the endless clamor of manufacturing. This piston-driven planet is the industrial heart of the Caradon sector, in a region located close to the ever-expanding Orc Empire of the Arc Arsonist, and also now the raging fury of the Great Rift. The role of this world could not be more pivotal. Metallica's endless production quotas see dozens of war fronts kept supplied with arms and armor. Meanwhile, its renowned macroclads of Skitarii and cohort cyberneticas deploy with machine-like efficiency to crush threats both piratical and heretical throughout the entire region. Such is the Metallican fervor for optimized industrial production and their worship of mechanical sterility over organic impurity that the Forge World has been scoured of all native flora and fauna. Yet to think that the planet is lifeless would be a complete error. From pole to pole, Metallica seethes with indentured labor, dead-eye servitors, and conclaves of tech priests avidly overseeing the production of yet more terrifying war engines and deadly weapons ready to fight in the Omnissiah's name. The cacophony of thundering pistons, roaring genitoriums, clattering assembly lines, and endless binaric plane songs roll across the entire artificial landscape like sonic tidal waves. To the Metallican faithful, this endless industrial din is inspiring to the point of being transcendental, for it is the sound of their world, worshipping the Omnissiah through deeds and output both. They even ensure that it is echoed in the purposefully amplified blare of the weaponry and machine they employ. Thus, every volley of fire or crushing armored advance is a prayer to the machine god. Metallica stands proudly apart from Mars, both physically and doctrinally. The Metallican priesthood have long resisted any Martian attempts to impose remote rule. Thus, their Skitarii display only the barest amount of crimson within their heraldry, a grudging nod to the red planet that is all but drowned out amidst the white of Metallica. This color is symbolic to the Metallicans, as it represents the purity of the machine and its inevitable victory over the weak organics. This strive for purity has been tested as never before in recent times, as Metallica has been assaulted by a Chaos invasion led by the Death Guard Traitor Legion. These forces of Chaos poured filth into the Caradon sector. The Forge World was able to launch counter-offensives in scores of systems, calculating its own borders to be secure. Yet the traitor's power was not so easily held at bay. When the Metallica system was attacked, its quarry world of Planetas saw fierce fighting. Labor revolts and agitation amongst Metallica's million-strong indentured workforce, particularly on this quarry world, had been rising as the Forge World's Fabricator General had dispersed the system's resources to defend the wider subsector. Nevertheless, this quarry world's Skitarii garrison had been bolstered to enforce and maintain the production quotas amongst the serf clans. Quantities of rare metals, magnesium ores, and ferromite once more flowed, yet it was a temporary reprieve. After some months, Metallica's high command suddenly received disturbing reports from more than a dozen mining operations on the quarry world. In mere days, heretical cults had revealed themselves, servitor units had malfunctioned, and some form of transmechanical corruption had spread to some of the mammoth mining engines that now altered course and headed for the subterranean forge complexes. Metallica rushed entire cohorts of Scutari to the side alongside macro transports laden with giant, disruptive engines of the Centurio Ordinatus. After 3 days, rampant electroviruses and madness that bloomed across the planet's surface, from the central hub of Crater Valley to the astropathic relays of Hypaea Mons. These maladies advanced in quickening waves until at the height they coincided with the opening of a warp rift in the heart of the Metallica system. In those dark days that followed, mankind came to know this rift as the Sore, and from it poured even greater threats. Rather than dash themselves against Metallica's rigid system defenses, the Death Guard had employed the rotting death throes of an entire world in a distant system to eat into the flesh of space and time. Like a maggot burrowing through a corpse, their sorcery had chewed open the rift, allowing immense and ancient warships to traverse the passage and lumber forth from the Sore. From them came attack craft bearing heretical Astartes, demon engines, and all manner of other corrupted horrors. The overseer imperator of the quarry world, Shyvon, had adapted her dominus war protocols as soon as the empiric energies of the Sore had been detected. Connected to the world's macrocognitator banks, Shyvon personally managed the overall strategy. The quarry world was a source of incredible wealth for Metallica, but of far greater value were the technologies employed upon the planet. The world's resources were scattered throughout hyperdense minerals requiring unique mechanisms and refinery processes to extract. Mining engines thought dating back to the system's colonization were relics beyond any price, as were the 2 atomic smelters and the fleets of servo-operated geodelvers. Dominus Shyvon, in a spheric communion with their senior magi, formulated a strategy. This 3-phase operation would brutally purge the corrupted elements already on the planet and hold back the worst that the Death Guard threw at them, all the while preparing for the retrieval of the sacred technologies and engine cores. At Garenhive, an uprising of rabid plague cultists were corralled by squadrons of sulfur hounds. They encircled huge mobs of the infected, driving back hundreds of sore-ridden heretics and techno-possessed servitors into flame-lit service tunnels before sealing them inside. Meanwhile, the attempted sabotage of the Prometheum repository by cultists in the dockyards were uncovered by the Sicarian infiltrators of Delta Maniple. The reinforcing cohorts of vanguards and rangers intercepted the cultists' own rear guard and destroyed the insurrectionist control center. The Dominus continued to feed more cohorts of devoted Scutari into the meat grinder of the planet. The evacuation of the irreplaceable and most sacred engines began in earnest, but it was a slow process. The vaunted artifact engines of the Ordinatus released their final incandescent payloads or kept firing their unique energy weapons until the last possible moment, before the singular Leviathans too were marked for retrieval. Hastily requested lifter barges fortified against the atmospheric descent had arrived from Metallica, and into their cavernous holds went these devices of exquisite and ancient design. The careful procedures of supplication and decontamination were carried out as swiftly as was dared. The tech priests were fearful of angering the machine spirits of those being evacuated. Super heavy capacitor ships grazed the atmosphere above the holy site, ionizing the air from miles around and sanctifying the ground with sparks of power. Shyvon surprised her junior tech priests by delegating oversight of these operations to them. She redoubled her efforts to curtail the Death Guard's victories, absorbing ever more sources of data as she orchestrated the global defense. She monitored teleportation flares, redirecting reinforcements to their locations within nanoseconds, and abandoned battles she saw as inconsequential. The evacuation of the planet's prized assets was mostly successful, though there were some tragic losses. At Mordibus Temple, the atomic smelter was destroyed when a rogue mining engine broke into the underforge from below. Far less tragic losses included the surviving cohorts of Scutari and the remaining loyal clans of the labor serfs. They were commanded to maintain their battle protocols until victory or termination, as the lifter barges bore their precious cargo back to Metallica itself. Now we move on to a less well-known Forge world, but still a badass Forge world, the Forge world of Incaldeon. The Forge world of Incaldeon was a world caught in an unceasing cycle of war, strife, and invasion that completely engulfed it before it was liberated by the forces of the Great Crusade. Founded by a Mechanicum sleep rock during the Age of Strife, it was a world rich in abundant raw mineral resources, as well as the necessary organic compounds for sustaining a biosphere. Incaldeon should have been a perfect locale to found a Forge world, but the same stable warp currents that had succeeded in carrying the Mechanicum to the world eventually brought a host of less welcome voyagers. Records of its initial founding remain fragmented, but it seems for certain that alongside the vast works of macro construction and geoforming that the ancient Mechanicum colonists undertook, conflict and battle were nearly a constant against a whole host of invaders. As a result, the Incaldeon Mechanicum, separated by vast distances from Mars, evolved into a distinct and highly warlike faction, and one that seldom united, as individual Forge Fanes often had to look to their own defense and survival. Wave after wave of Xeno invasions spurred on unusual avenues of technological development, and the creation of vast fortified cities, which dominated and defended the rich mineral seams and algae-rich seas, while hidden Forge Fanes were sunk kilometers beneath the planet's crust. The Forge Fanes also had to adapt to a new method of acquiring additional human stock by raiding the feral populations of the world, which brought echoes of barbarous and savage cultures that began to infect the increasingly schismatic machine cult. Throughout this long and savage history, the League of Furians formed the principal military force of the Incaldeon's ruling Archmagos, known as the Preceptor General. Its titans served as the avatars of her will. No resource was spared in the Titan Legion's maintenance, and wherever possible, due to lulls in the fighting, the expansion of its combat strength became a priority. Their more common nickname, the Tiger Eyes, also stems from this early period as a corruption of the name given to them by the feral tribes of the nearby world of Humardu, to whom the Titans truly were divine and terrible beings, come to reap a sacrifice for the young and strong to serve in the palace of the gods. Unlike some garrisoning Titan legions before the Great Crusade, the League of Furians did not stand vigil as enforcers of petty empires. They weren't the machine god servants, but rather fought an unceasing war against a host of foes. For centuries, the League of Furians unleashed their wrath against the invading hordes of Orc marauders and the spiteful raids of Eldar Corsairs, scavenging Talarian warpacks, and the colossal horrors of meteor-wrought cornoplasm infections from the Abyssal Reef. Such ceaseless conflict took their toll, both on Incaldeon itself and the League of Furians who defended it. Around 50 standard years before the Great Crusade would finally reach Incaldeon, after a particularly brutal series of incursions and raids, the Tagmata Omnissium, the feudal order upon which the defense and the military hierarchy of the Forge world of the Mechanicum was based, finally broke down. In the ensuing strife, the Preceptor General of Incaldeon was assassinated, and the Forge world split into warring or isolated factions, battling for central control or coordination, laying it open to invasion and the devastation which followed. By the time the Great Crusade's advanced elements reached Incaldeon, it was a global battleground, fought over by dozens of different armies, the Mechanicum, Renegades, and Xeno alike, unleashing atomic fire and yet more savage weapons upon each other. During this time, overwhelmed and vastly outnumbered, the Tiger Eyes refused to retreat or retrench, and they shattered its blade on foes uncounted, until it became only a shadow of its former might, and was reduced to defending the last Forge Fane of its dead regent. After Imperial contact, Mars was determined to bring Incaldeon into the fold of the Imperium, but the Great Crusade was at that time engaged in major battles throughout a series of fronts, and much of the Mechanicum's military forces were tied up in ongoing campaigns. It instead fell to the 8th Expeditionary Fleet's frontline force of the Iron Warriors to bear the brunt of the liberation action, with supporting elements from the Legio Mortis and the Martian Scutari and Secutari forces. The resulting campaign proved to be the bloodiest for the Iron Warriors' history to that point, but after 2 Terran years of guerrilla warfare, Incaldeon joined the Imperium. In the aftermath, the lost forges and fortress citadels were quickly reclaimed and repaired by the now ruling Imperial-backed Mechanicum faction. Warship squadrons, now permanently based in the Incaldeon system, gave the Forge world respite from attack for the first time in its history, and the vast mineral wealth and productive capabilities of the planet were quickly put into action to fuel the ever-expanding Great Crusade. Oaths of loyalty and debts of blood to the Liberators were affirmed, although in this, Mars and the Legio Mortis were judged by the Incaldeon Mechanicum to be their saviors, rather than the Iron Warriors who had expended so many Astartes lives in the war. As a key part of repaying their debt, the League of Furians was quickly reconstituted and rearmed, with the deep Titan forges beneath the planet's surface put to continuous operation to fuel the second birth of the Titan Legion. Traveling beyond Incaldeon, the League of Furians pursued conflict with an aggressive fervor and tempo of battle seldom matched by any other Titan Legion of that period, splitting their forces into demi-legions and striking groups operating alongside numerous Imperial Expeditionary fleets and extermination forces. When the War of the Horus Heresy broke out, it was revealed immediately that the League of Furians had sided with the War Master Horus, as did both the Fabricator General of Mars and the Legio Mortis. It is clear in hindsight that the Legion knew of the planned treachery beforehand and were a key and willing part of the War Master's early battle plans and deployment from the start, such as the dispatch of the Demi-Legion of the Tiger Eyes to the Paramar assault force before blood had yet spilled on Isfahan V. Very quickly, the ancient rituals and ceremonies of the Legion blossomed into a twisted arcana of what would become known as the Dark Mechanicus, though by declaring to Horus's cause, Incaldeon fell quickly into a bloody civil war of its own, the absence of its Titan Legion having stripped its new Preceptor General's principal agency of overmatching powers against its rivals. Following the end of the Horus Heresy, when the traitor legions were driven back into the hellish realm of the Eye of Terror, the newly reformed Adeptus Mechanicus deemed that Incaldeon's worth as a forge world and its potential industrial output was worth saving. Since that time, Incaldeon has continued to serve as a vital forge world of the Imperium. However, recently, Incaldeon was incriminated in a conspiracy connected to the techno-heretics and worshippers of a prescribed Xeno lore. Eventually, after the Great Rift was created, Incaldeon suffered a series of invasions from several thousand-son warbands known as the Cult of Knowledge. During one of these raids, the cult managed to sacrifice the population of the Forge World and bound their soul essence to a weapon known as Incaldeon's Cry. When this relic Wormflame pistol is used, it overloads the psyche of the target with anguish and pain. A very valuable STC has also gone missing during one of these raids. Now let's bring it back to a more well-known Forge World, the Forge World of Lucius. Classified as a Super Natura Majoris, the Forge World of Lucius is a vast, hollowed planet whose industrial sprawl carpets its inner surface. In the planet's empty heart burns an immense artificial sun, a fusion mega-reactor that the Lucian tech priests claim to have built, but whose origin may be more mysterious. What makes the powerful Forge World of Lucius so interesting is that it suffered the perils of doctrinal dissent. Long ago, the planet's Forge Star almost was sent into critical overload during the infamous Incaldeon Schism. Lucius survived the near catastrophe and has ever since been a blazing beacon of orthodoxy and compliance with the dictates of Mars. Their tech priests have proven to be fierce of faith and dynamic of action. They are truly devoted servants of the Omnissiah. Moreover, the incalculable energy yield of their artificial star ensures that the Lucian Magi stand at the forefront of martial production. Their world has the capacity to fashion many incredible technologies, not least of which is the proprietary alloyed Lucian. This remarkable substance is incorporated into the ornate masterwork weapons and bionics, which are granted to the most worthy Scutari and the marshals that lead them. More than this, Lucius patterned weapons and war engines have all garnered a well-deserved reputation for excellence across the vast swaths of the Imperium, from the radium carbines and the galvanic rifles of Lucius's own Scutari to the half-mile-long void-ship lance arrays, heavily armored battle tanks, mass-stamped lasguns, and bizarre techno-esoterica. The mark of this Forge World is the byword of quality and efficiency. Amongst the most amazing of Lucius's technologies are the immense god engines of its Titan Legion. Known as the Legio Ostorum, or more commonly known as Warp Runners, these machines glory in the unique ability to teleport directly into battle. It goes without saying that the sudden appearance of a towering engine of destruction upon the battlefield has won more than one battle in a spectacular fashion, with weaker-willed foes fleeing in panic or dropping dead from terror before the Legio Ostorum engine so much as opened fire. Yet the Warp Runners are far from Lucius's only proud martial asset. Ever eager to strike out into the galaxy and take from it the natural resources to feed the blessed forges, Lucius macroclads are amongst the swiftest and the most aggressive fielded by any Forge World. Iron Striders and Doomcrawlers surge towards the enemy with ferocious speed, often outrunning the enemy before they realize their peril. The genius and innovation of the tech priest of Lucius was displayed anew when a splinter fleet of High Fleet Leviathan invaded the planet. Dispatching their legal cybernetica and a great host of battle servitors to the planet's outer surface, the tech priest Dominus largely fought their battles from below the planet's crust. By tracking the motions of their servant clades and controlling activities via data tether, they waged their war without risking direct harm. Wherever the Tyranid swarm overcame their servitor armies, the tech priests waited for the Xenopredators to devour the meager biological components before sending serval skull swarms to carry the most vital of the remaining machine parts below the crust of the planet. There they were installed into fresh recruits, and the next wave was sent back into the surface. Though it took months to accomplish, the resulting war of attrition ended in victory. Deprived of biomatter, the Tyranid splinter fleet was forced to feed upon itself to generate replacement broods, and the Xenos could not keep pace with the recycled machinery parts and the refurbished robots. Now let's talk about another one of my favorite Forge world, the Forge world of Agrapena. Agrapena is a Forge world scarred by war, its legions forged in conflict's crucible and tempered through the fires of countless hellish battles. Long has this Forge world resisted the hostile attentions of the Dark God's minions, for it stands perilously close to the warp maw known as the Eye of Terror. Once Agrapena labored day and night to supply the fortress world of Cadia with munitions for its endless vigil over the Eye of Terror. So integral to the Forge world was this mission that some tech priests had interpreted the hermetic symbols of Agrappena's iconography as representing the Cadian Gate standing supreme over the forces of chaos. Cadia's fall has forced these and countless other assumptions to be rethought. Even before Abaddon's victory during the 13th Black Crusade, Agrapena was already a heavily fortified and war-scarred world. Heretic raiding parties struck at the Forge world often, some seeking to plunder its technological secrets, while others hoped to disrupt the planet's crucial supply lines to key worlds throughout the Cadian war zone. Since Cadia's fall, the frequency and severity of these attacks has increased tenfold. Agrapena exists in a state of near-constant conflict, fighting wars of both attack and defense as its macro-clads seek to drive back the endless tides of foes spilling from the Eye of Terror. Typically dispassionate, the planet's tech priests have taken every opportunity to hone their armies and defenses both, dissecting every data psalm and noospheric inquisition extracted from each battle and employing their learnings with dogmatic determination. Yet the priests of the Omnissiah are not above emotion when pushed. The assaults upon their world by the unclean servants of the Dark Mechanicus, by obliterator cults, warpsmiths, and even loathsome traitor titan legions have instilled in the tech priest of Agrapena a cold and unbending hatred for the worshippers of the Dark Gods. The priests have perfected countless methods of slaughtering their heretic foes and will fight on against them even upon the collapse of logic and reason. While Agrappena's stoic defenders have refined their protocols of repudiation and dogged resistance, its tech priests have formulated complex strategies of aggressive counter-sieges as well. Huge wedges of sulfur hounds are unleashed upon advancing enemy formations in shockingly brutal and seemingly reckless maneuvers. Smaller units of Skitarii Rangers and Raiders harry the enemy, while flights of Stratoraptors strike simultaneously, sometimes adding greatly to the Forge world's own casualties. Any surviving Skitarii of the first charge are pulled back into the second wave, and then the procedure repeats. By the time the enemy reaches the guns of the stationary defenders, they are fractured, bloodied, and demoralized, their cohesion ready to fall upon Agrappena's forces. As with many powerful and well-fortified worlds throughout the wider Cadian Gate, Agrapena has become a focal point of not only conflict, but also refugees. It is natural that fleeing Imperial citizens and soldiery alike would put aside their prejudices in such desperate times and seek shelter behind the ironclad bulwarks of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Agrapena welcomes all willing to serve the Omnissiah. Many have chosen starvation over what the planet's magi see as logical contributions to the ultimate victory, but countless others have stepped willingly into the Omnissiah's embrace. This influx of raw, organic material have thus far allowed Agrapena to replace losses amongst its labor-clads and the Skitarii cohorts as swiftly as they are inflicted. Whether this will continue to be the case remains to be seen. Now let's talk about the Forge world of Ryza. The Forge world of Ryza is famed as the cradle from which many plasma-based weapon technology has sprung. It is the originator of such wonders as the Stormblade and the Leman Russ Executioner. Yet for all its magnificence and tech heritage, Ryza is a world sorely embattled, caught amidst the storm of Xeno foes. From its forge temples to its colossal dust dunes, its smog-thick skies and acidic rivers to its dense clouds of low-orbital industrial platforms, Ryza stands besieged. The greenskins of two vast orc wogs have converged upon the Forge world in their billions, Wog Grax and Wog Rarguts, either of which by themselves possess the sheer strength and weight of numbers and brutish warriors and war machines to completely overwhelm an entire Imperial system, and yet they pour down upon Ryza in endless waves. Savage greenskin techno-barbarians blast ancient and irreplaceable machineries to scrap, then add insult to injury by scavenging the wreckage in order to fashion ramshackled weapons of their own. Roaring with glee, hordes of orcs surge upon the planet's surface in breakneck races and beat against the defenses of each forge complex like the crashing waves of a bestial storm. For all of this, Ryza remains unbowed. If anything, the world's tech priests could be accused of taking an unseemingly delight in some aspects of their world's predicament. With the express permission of their world's fabricator general, the Priest of Ryza unleashed the most potent weapons in their arsenal upon the invaders, treating each new engagement as a testing ground and gathering reams of combat data from victory and defeat alike. From macro Gatling lasers and plasma disintegration cannons to building-sized transdimensional beamers, anti-gravitic minefields, electrovoltic blunderbusses, and countless other martial esoterica, the Priest of Ryza unleashed endlessly terrifying weapons against the Orc invaders. And of course, this has transformed the planet's surface into a hellish vision of total war. Yet neither the Ryzen themselves nor their green-skinned foes appear perturbed by the nightmare they have created. Nor does Ryza fight alone. Colossal titans wade through the wreckage of blasted manufactorums with guns thundering. Regiments of the Catachan Imperial Guardsmen battle their alien foes through the toxic swamps of the Ryzen hinterlands. Through a mass martial might and ever-developing weaponry, the Forge World continues to resist the overwhelming greenskin invasion. Though the battle still shows no end in sight, Ryza's commitment to the other war zones remains undiminished, and they seek ever more diverse testing grounds for their protocols and their materials. And then there's the Forge World of Graia, the Crown of Miracles. The armed forces of this Forge World are amongst the most indomitable and downright stubborn to fight in the defense of the Imperium. They are the byword of martial discipline and obediency both, advancing into firestorms with inhuman fearlessness that is as unsettling as it is inspirational. Everything about the armies of this Forge World beseek ironclad control. So hardwired is their logic, it is said that they can even shield themselves from the malignant attentions of the enemy Psyker. Prior to entering battle, the ruling tech priests of the Graian military draw upon resilient battle plans and doctrinal subordinates based on disposition logic. These are then disseminated into their foot soldiers with the weight of holy right. So commanded, every Graian warrior knows their role in the wider shape of the battle, and they strive to fulfill it with unswerving determination. There are many eyewitness accounts from other Imperial forces of Graian Skitarii acting more like battle automatons than living, thinking beings. Neither terrifying inhuman enemies nor thunderous incoming fire can halt the warriors of Graia. Indeed, these macroclads have been described as pressing forward onto their own destruction with an almost mindless determination. This tenacity has proven an asset upon many battlefields where the Graian soldiery have crushed their foes under a relentless advance, or waged attrition battles that eventually broke the enemy with the horrors of their cost. And yet this has also proven to be a detriment in battle, where prudent retreat or rapid tactical flexibility would have prevented the wholesale annihilation of Graia's advancing cohort. Of course, such tragic defeats carry little emotional weight with the Forge World's tech priests. Instead, each such disaster is simply analyzed, dissected, and broken down into strategic data which is fed into the predictive models of future conflicts. Graia itself is unusual in that the Forge World is crested by a geometrically perfect ring of space stations known as the Graian Crown. It is within this megastructure that the Forge World's armies reside, and from it they deploy en masse to repel those who would seek to invade the world below. Moreover, the entire vast structure can move under its own power, and even translate into warp space, allowing the armies of Graia to forge out across the galaxy and exploit the resources of distant worlds, though knowledge of this technology is suppressed as much as possible. Travel aboard the Graian Crown is an imperfect process. The megastructure has repeatedly attracted the hostile attention of both warp entities and the ancient Necrons, and entire battles have been fought within its weirdly symmetrical depths to prevent it from being overrun or captured. Yet so great an advantage is this immense battle fortress that the logical value of its use to Graia far outweighs the potential risk of its loss to hostile enemy forces. When the Graian Crown leaves its Forge World, its fabricator temples are stocked with munitions and its holding decks provisioned with thousands of volunteers. Once a suitable resource-rich world has been discovered, the Crown locks into a stationary orbit like a tick. Fleets of industrial harvesters descend, leeching the world of its asset. Should an enemy be foolish enough to attempt to board the Crown, its production subroutine adapts. Hundreds of freshly built Skitarian servitors pour off the production lines every single minute, and servo carts deliver vast quantities of ammunition to their defenders. While the foe continues to be bled, the plunder of their world below continues unabated. Now that we know the lore to the major Forge Worlds of the Imperium of Man, let's get into individual sectors as we learn about all of the Forge Worlds in the Calixis sector. Idume is a minor Forge World of the Adeptus Mechanicus, located in the Segmentum Obscurus, located near the edge of the Warp Rift, known as the Hazeroth Abyss, in the Calixis sector. Much of the early history of Idume is unknown, but presumably this world was discovered and colonized by early Mechanicum explorators sometime during the Age of Strife or millennia later, during the era of the Great Crusade. This Calixian world has long been disadvantaged by its location on the edge of the Hazaroth Abyss and lack of strategic importance. The Forge Masters of Idume have for centuries considered themselves to be sidelined and undermined by the central authorities of the late system, a disaffection that the Fenanites have been quick to exploit. Much of Idume's upper echelons were hopelessly entrapped by the Fenanite conspiracy, corrupted by the offer of forbidden lore, and coerced through a concentrated program of targeted murders and sabotage. The Forge World itself now houses numerous secret facilities for the faction, as well as serving to provide a steady supply of manpower, experimental subjects, and a hidden port. The Fenanites have encountered a dangerous foe in the form of the Amaranthian Syndicate, a deadly mercenary alliance of far traders and smugglers who operate within the deeps of the Hazaroth Abyss. At first, they seemed to be an ideal target for the Fenanites' attention. However, as they moved against the group, it quickly became apparent that they had made a grave error. The Syndicate proved already to be the cat's paw of another darker force, more than able to take on and destroy the Fenanite agents with ease, rather than fight a war against a power whose nature and extent they do not fully understand. The Fenanites are now giving the Syndicate a wide berth wherever they can, until they can find out more. This reversal has placed them in an awkward position, and so now they must thread a tightrope of bringing other more legitimate inquisitorial authorities to bear on what is clearly a threat not only to them but to the sector itself, and do so without exposing their own true nature in the process. Ascalon is host to many forge worlds of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the greatest of which is Ceremonies Magnus. It exists in the Mechanicum's own empire that coexists within the sector. Despite this, Cerix, and to a lesser extent its sister forge worlds, Sylvanas Binary and Cor Theta, are as reliant on the sector as it is on them, for without raw materials from elsewhere, the forges would sputter and grow cold. Ceremonies Magnus must have been settled soon after the Ascalon's founding, for it has been populated by the servants of the machine god or their predecessors for as long as any record states. The world's ancient history is largely unknown outside of its own data repositories, and the master of Ceremonies Magnus refuses outsider access to their archives. It is assumed that the world was host to some engineer caste even before the Scions of Mars rose as a power during the earliest days of the Imperium. With the arrival of the Imperial Expeditionary fleets and the Mechanica, it and its sister worlds were readily transformed to the control of the machine cult. Fragmentary records hint at an unnamed treachery during this period, but areas of the three Forge Worlds archives have been deliberately sealed or even destroyed, and the truth may never be known. However, echoes of this terrible occurrence, whispered as the brass scouring, still ring across the millennia. Throughout the Age of the Imperium, Ceremonies Magnus has led the Forge Worlds of the Ascalon, entering into a number of reciprocal arrangements with other factions, including several nearby knightly worlds. In return for the supply of weapons and other advanced materials they manufacture, the numerous other worlds serve what needs it cannot meet itself. These range from raw natural resources vital to manufacturing, to knights and other forces in time of armed conflict, to a supply of sinners to be converted into the many servitors each forge relies upon for its many tasks. Outsiders are not welcomed upon Ceremonies Magnus, nor indeed any Adeptus Mechanicus holding in the sector. But those who do have cause to visit the world report that it is hostile to most forms of non-augmented life. The atmosphere is thin, providing scant protection from the baleful radiation cast upon it by the system's bloated star, Cerix Trinus. So massive and bright is this star that Ceremonies Magnus is thought to have had its orbit altered at some point in the distant past, in order to survive the periodic storms emanating from its photosphere. The planet's surface is cast in a ghostly blue light by its star, which despite its great distance looms threateningly in the polluted sky. No oceans exist, and the world's mountain ranges have long since been hollowed out to form the core of its factory hives. The highest point on the surface is Assembly 010, a mountain hive rearing almost 20 kilometers into the atmosphere, its interior plunging so deep into the crust it is thought to penetrate the mantle below. Assembly 010 is the seat of the ruling council of Ceremonies Magnus, the Quorum Primus, a body that has absolute power over every servant of the Omnissiah on the planet, and has had nominal command over Sylvanas Binary, Core Theta, and many lesser Forge worlds across the sector. Ceremonies Magnus produces a massive range of weapons and other advanced materials, but over the millennia have established itself in a number of specialized areas. It is perhaps best known for the superior technologies that rely on exotic field effects. These range from plasma containment systems to personal field projectors, but at the extremes include teleportation devices and Geller field systems based on venerated ancient templates. In addition to its primary function as a center of advanced manufacturing, Ceremonies Magnus sometimes serves as a layover point for the Adeptus Mechanicus explorator fleets that roam the sector and beyond in search for archaeotech and other treasures. Recent centuries have seen some stopovers grow even more perilous as the pandemonium becomes steadily more severe. Several Bioneric legends on Ceremonies Magnus cant that during the mythical scouring, an entire Forge world vanished from record, along with the blessed Adeptus Titanicus forces. Many tech priest questors are certain that somewhere, buried in the devastated waste of a lost world, lies an entire legion of the most formidable war machines ever to walk the battlefield of mankind's wars. Should these titans be discovered, this sector would surely tremble beneath their metallic feet. Styges 8, also known as the ever-staring Cyclops, is an imperial forge world of the Adeptus Mechanicus that is located on the 7th and largest moon, orbiting a massive gas giant on the outer fringes of the Vulcanist system in the Segmentum Pacificus, perilously near the Eye of Terror. There is no Forge world less trusted by the Imperium than Styges 8. The Forge world was once home to 2 Titan legions. While unusual for a single star system to support 2 Titan legions, it is far from unknown, as Mars itself supported 3. Styges 8 was granted 2 legions due to its close proximity to the Eye of Terror, and the attendant risk of chaos attacks on its important Forge world. Most of the Twin Legion's war engines were on crusade with the War Master Horus when the Horus Heresy began. In a series of bloody surprise attacks, a core of Chaos cultists back on Styges 8 seized control of the Forge world's manufactorums. Reduced to a small group of loyalist tech priests, these valiant defenders protected the planet's Temple of Knowledge against the rogue cultists and their hastily improvised berserker machines they had produced. Trapped and on their own, the loyalists expected that death would eventually follow, but an unanticipated liberation came on the 31st solar day of the siege in the form of the graceful Eldar Titans and hundreds of jet-bike-mounted warriors of the Simhan craft world who smashed the servants of chaos. They had not come to help the Monkai, however. They were there to deny the forces of chaos such a strategically potent manufacturing world so close to the Eye of Terror. When the Horus Heresy finally ended, both the traitor Titan legions of Styges 8 fled into exile within the massive warp rift. After that, the planet became home to a third loyalist Titan legion, the Legio Honorum, and the support of the Eldar led to the creation of a secretive sect within the Adeptus Mechanicus, known as Zenerites. The Zenerites are dedicated to the study and exploitation of alien technology, a policy which most tech priests find highly offensive. The Zenerites point to the intervention of the Eldari to assist the true followers of the Machine God, as a sign that even they are subject to his will, and it is their sacred duty to study them. Aware of the hostility of their colleagues, the Zenerites pursued a policy of covert study, often dispatching cohorts of Scutari to garrison alien sites instead of bringing artifacts back to the Forge world for study as prescribed by the Mechanicus doctrines. It is not unusual for Zenirite expeditions to come under attack from alien populations, planetary garrisons, or even Scutari legions of other Forge worlds. Open war with Imperial authority is not unknown. This regrettable occurrence has only served to drive the Zenirites deeper underground. Even with an official sanction, a secret war unfolds upon Styges 8. Within its yawning reliquary halls, battles between Deathwatch kill teams and radical tech priests are still a disturbingly frequent occurrence. There are those amongst the Styges priesthood who have taken their obsession with Xeno war tech to another level entirely, breaching the ancient webway portals of the nearby sibling world of Vulcanus 3, and taking entire war processions into the labyrinth dimension of the Eldari. They seek nothing less than to find the Black Library, plunder its boundless riches of knowledge, and return triumphant to Styges 8, even if they have to cut their way through Eldarly Harlequins, Chaos Space Marines, or worse to achieve their goal. Currently, Styges 8 is a production grade 2 extremis forge world with a tithe grade of Adeptus None, meaning it pays no tithes to the Administratum, as its industrial output is considered to be potent strategic value for the Imperium in and of itself. Styges 8 produces everything from Astra Militarum infantry weapons and battle tanks to the mighty battle titans of the Collegia Titanica. The forge cities of Styges 8 are the home of some of the best munition artisans in the Imperium, and they produce gun barrels, recoil dampeners, and propellant chemicals second only to Mars itself in quality. This forge world is home to a device known as the Omnissiah's Hand. It is a gauntlet lined with a concealed array of digital lasers believed to be of Jakaro origin. Such items might be tech heresy to the other forge worlds, but many tech adepts of Styges 8 have become obsessed in their quest to replicate its technology. Thus far, their best efforts have been to no avail. When the armies of this forge world march into war, they do so beneath stealth screening projectors and target befouling apparatuses. The tech priests of this forge world deny owning such technology only reinforces their untrustworthy reputation. To prove that their faith in the Omnissiah is pure, their heraldry incorporates the colors of Mars, albeit redistributed. The bulk of Styges 8 Scutari wear long, pitch-black robes of endless night, crimson armor plates, the sacred color of Mars, and burnished steel cybernetics. Should such a warrior shed his robe, he could also pass off as one of Mars' cohorts, a similarity Styges has exploited many times. Likewise, the deep red of the Cult Mechanicus is proudly displayed on the armor plates of the Stygian Castellan-class robots and the tech priests who command them, with icon glyphs proudly picked out in white. The officers of the Styges 8 fight at the front lines of the war for enlightenment, when their red, silver, and black heraldry is sighted near an excavation or quarantine zone. The treasures inside will be sieged in Styges' name, no matter what it takes. The forces of Styges 8 have had many run-ins with both Xeno, Heretic, and even friends. One such event occurred when the Scutari of the Forge World were sent to the ocean world of Magog, when the planet's industry dried up its ocean to reveal Necron tier architecture. The Scutari fought valiantly against the Necrons of the Awakened Tomb Complex, allowing the planet's islander people to evacuate to a man, but were badly outmatched. Only their commanding tech priests, hunting for knowledge behind enemy lines, escaped the ensuing carnage. However, in doing so, they clashed with a Necron overlord, Trazyn the Infinite. One by one, the tech priests were collected in stasis fields and displayed as part of a monument to Magog's fall. Deimos, also known as the Steel Forge, was once one of the two moons of Mars, which now serves as the major forge world for the Grey Knight Space Marines, the chamber militant of the Inquisition's Ordo Malleus. Long ago, upon the inception of this secret chapter, the Grey Knights made an alliance with the Adeptus Mechanicus, and as part of their bargain, were gifted with the forge world of Deimos. Tasked with directly combating the demonic threat, it was recognized that they would need their own forge world. Using arcane technologies, Deimos, one of the heavily industrialized moons of Mars, was stolen out of its orbit, dragged across the Sol system, and secretly relocated above Titan, the shrouded homeworld of the Grey Knights. Its mass mined and converted until it was more of a star fort than celestial body. The war needs of the Grey Knights call for a constant supply of ammunition and ordnance, and Deimos is blessed with a great many macro clans, all bearing the triple blessings of the Omnissiah. Deimos' armies are used as guardians, as procurement forces, and upon request, are sent to march forth into battle alongside the Grey Knights. Additionally, no fewer than 3 knightly houses are permanently stationed upon Deimos, including House Steel, whose vows of silence in service to the Adeptus Mechanicus have lasted since the Great Crusade. Since the relocation of this forge world from its position as a moon of Mars to the orbit above Titan, all weapons required by the Emperor's demon hunters have been produced by the Manufactura of Deimos. This includes standard Adeptus Astartes armaments, as well as all specialist gear required to combat warp-based foes, from side cannon ammunition to deadly psych-out grenades. Each item receives psychic wards atop the blessings of the Omnissiah to ensure protection against demonic taint. Only the Nemesis Force weaponry is created in the Citadel by the Grey Knights Tech Marines themselves. All other material is ferried down from Deimos in an endless stream of heavily guarded transports. Especially debilitated servitors oversee the packaging and transportation of everything destined for Titan, loading packages in utmost secrecy to ensure that no one, not even the tech magos of Deimos, know the extent of the Grey Knight's arsenal. The same servitors are then mind-wiped and their circuits scrubbed clear before their return to Deimos, lest the enemies of the Imperium were ever to dissect their shriveled brains. Such extreme measures ensure that the secret of the Grey Knights can never be learned by the tech priests, and conversely, that the psychic Grey Knights cannot themselves glean anything of the clandestine mysteries of the Adeptus Mechanicus. When the Martian moon was gifted to Titan by the Adeptus Mechanicus, it carried with it a void ship loaded with some of the finest weapons the Imperium has ever created. Among them was the Stormbolter, Fury of Deimos, a weapon crafted by the first Fabricator General of the Mechanicum, superior in range, accuracy, rate of fire, and reliability to a normal Stormbolter. It is a relic whose secrets have long been forgotten. Now, I wanted to throw in a bonus for you guys. This is a Forge world that was corrupted by chaos, the Forge world of Zaur-Khan. Zaur-Khan is a Forge world of the Adeptus Mechanicus, as well as a Death world that sits at the heart of its own small stellar empire. Much of the knowledge of Zaur-Khan is based on the data recovered by the Metallica and Mechanicum during the Great Scouring, and even these records are cursory and fragmentary at best. Hence, the specifics of the Forge world's curious history, especially its beginnings, remains unknown. What is certain is that Zaur-Khan was initially founded by the Mechanicum Ark Expedition, heralding from Sacred Mars itself. The time frame of its inception is still debated among scholars, but is generally agreed upon as falling in the latter years of the Dark Age of technology. To reach their final destination, the Mechanicum Ark must have been flung wildly off course from its intended target. What lore remains indicates that a powerful warp storm was responsible for wrecking the Ark's warp drives, as well as damaging its more conventional engines, thus prompting an emergency translation back into real space. When the Mechanicum Ark re-entered reality, be it by the hand of fate or blind luck, it was amid the uncharted and unknown stars of the deep galactic south. Orbiting a white star, the system they had emerged in counted numerous minor volcanically active planets, gas giants, and thick webs of asteroid belts, but only one green world capable of harboring life. That any world within range of the stricken Ark was habitable was viewed as a miracle by many colonists. Calculating that this world offered their only chance at survival, the Mechanicum Ark limped towards its destination, gathering more information as it closed in with the planet. Its atmosphere, harbored oxygen, and the 3 moons orbiting it were determined to possess heavy mineral concentrations, making it suitable for settlement and offering the opportunity for potential expansion. Full of confidence, the colonists named their new system Zao and landed their craft on the new world. It was only after landing that the colonists realized that their new haven was a blighted one. Fate had delivered them onto a death world. The tropical world boasted an atmospheric oxygen level far above the Terran norm, while local flora and fauna quickly proved highly toxic for any augmented human. The prevailing climate was that of a tropical rainforest, with wildly fluctuating temperatures and ceaseless rainfall, which brought humidity to severe levels. These harsh atmospheric conditions left the colonists with little choice but to remain in those sections of their forced-landed Ark and its cargo holds that could be fully airlocked and were able to shield them from Zaur-Khan's weather. The first parties to venture outside the downed vessel soon testified to their new homeworld's ability to sustain life. Grossly enlarged fauna that grew at a speed seldom seen, and an extensive population of monstrously large arthropods provided a snapshot of the planet's hostile ecosystem. From the outset, the aggressive level of these beasts threatened the very existence of the colony, and if it had not been for the handful of Titans that had survived in the Ark's holds, the colonists' survival would have been impossible. Thus began the Titans' unceasing Iron Vigil, which would later become the name of the Legos Zistobais, the Forge World's most powerful protectors. To the colonists of Zaur-Khan, It must have seemed as if the fertile world consciously resisted every attempt at colonization. The myriad different species of trees formed a dense canopy that led through little sunlight, but at the same time, these trees were so tall that they reached above the cloud level, which meant that the storms and monsoon rains formed directly over the colonists' heads, the foliage of the canopy further trapping the humidity below, causing intense corrosion that reached previously unseen levels. Even when the colonists tried to cut these trees down, the oxygen-rich atmosphere and the increased sunlight let the ground erupt with new saplings, the forest growing even thicker in the short-lived clearings made by the colonists, where the canopy grew so thick as to entirely block the rays of Zaustar. Great macro-predators made their lairs, and the ferociousness of these beasts ensured that the colonist titans never ran out of targets. The only human edible produce of Zawarkad proved to be a tuber, and even this had to be boiled and filtered repeatedly for many solar hours before it could be consumed with no or few ill effects. But even with Zawarkad trying to kill them, the human colonists held on, as mankind has always done and will continue to do. The colonists of Zawarkad forged their home through adversity, driven by their own iron faith in the Omnissiah and the Martian doctrine of unceasing labor. Quickly realizing that expansion across Zawarkad's surface would be futile, the colonists decided to live beneath the ground, where the atmosphere could be more easily regulated and they would be safe from the predators of Zawarkad's macrofauna. Using the deteriorating shell of their colony ark as cover, deep access shafts were cut into the subsurface, allowing colonists to abandon the cannibalized wreckage of their starship and start a new existence deep below the surface. This venture marked the foundation of the world's first Forge Fane. Others would eventually follow, as painstaking expeditions were sent out into the wild, braving the dangers of the rainforests, exploring new regions, and sinking new biomes and Forge Fanes into the ground. As the first Forge Fanes slowly became functional, the worker caste was granted new technologies that allowed them to complete their work with greater speed and efficiency. Each standard year, more Forge Fanes were founded, and within the space of one Terran century, Zawarkad reached the ranks of a fully self-sustained Forge world. To mark this occasion, the world's planetary governor, now bearing the newly created title of Supreme Domini of the Zawarkad, announced the start of the First Conjunction, a period of time during which the Forge world would aim towards becoming fully equipped and functional, a golden age of economic expansion that allowed Zawarkad to grow strong. As part of the First Conjunction, the settlers of Zawarkad not only limited their ambitions to just the development of their world, but also turned their gaze skyward. The 3 moons orbiting Zawarkad, which were designated Arkad 1, 2, and 3, harbored welcome mineral resources that Forge worlds needed desperately to grow and evolve. With this goal in mind, permanent mining bases were established on each moon. To reach them, the first transorbital spacecrafts were manufactured from repurposed materials drawn from the remains of the Mechanicum arc, and powered using simple hydrogen torch engines. As exploitation began on Zawarkad's moon, it was quickly deemed more efficient to harbor much of the labor force on lunar colonies rather than Zawarkad itself. The First Conjunction would last for an entire Terran millennia before it was declared complete by the Office of the Supreme Domini. By its own accord, each Forge Fane was now considered fully operational, while the population of the servile workers in their lunar bases had risen into the hundreds of thousands. Each generation of workers totally devoted to generating resources for their master's use below. The Supreme Domini and the governing Magister Locum of every Forge Fane had long awaited the announcement of the First Conjunction's completion, and had already laid out the objectives of their second phase of expansion, the Second Conjunction. Unknowingly, Zawarkad had entered its last years of prosperity. With the lunar transportation fleet now numbering dozens of transportation barracks and shuttles, the influx of raw materials extracted from the lunar colonies permitted the Forge Fanes to expand and research new and more efficient technologies. Yet this was still not enough for the tech adepts to achieve their desired ends. While useful, the materials extracted from the lunar colonies lacked the essential properties needed to develop the more advanced technologies each forge fane secretly or openly coveted. In particular, the moons lacked void-worthy material that would allow the domains of Zau-Arkad to grow beyond their own orbit and let them claim the entire Zau system and its untapped resources. A first step to achieving this goal was to settle and claim the neighboring volcanic world of Nitos. To ensure that the effort expended on this venture would not be in vain, the Magi of Zau-Arkad launched a new space program to send unmanned survey probes to Nitos. What these probes found confirmed that the Magi's suspicion. Nitos did harbor the rare elements desired by the Forge Fanes. With the lunar colonies rapidly reaching the limits of their production, the necessary surplus population for a grand settlement expedition existed, and so the colonization of Nitos was fixed as the first great target of Zau-Arkad's second conjunction. Reaching the goals of the second conjunction was no easy task. While the lunar colonies had yielded welcoming mineral wealth, none of the moons harbored any of the specialist materials necessary to build additional long-range spacecraft. As Zau-Arkad had already consumed all the void-worthy materials from their original Mechanicum arc for the construction of their lunar transport fleet and a small conveyor fleet, the Magi were faced with a difficult decision. In the end, military considerations tipped the balance, and it was decided that several transport barges would be wrecked and that their materials used for the creation of a single explorer vessel, which would transport up to 20,000 colonists to their new home. For this purpose, the hydrotorch engines of the lunar barges would be linked into great reactor blocks to allow the vessel to break free of the grip of Zau-Arkad's gravity. The explorer's atmospheric pressure system and life support were equally boosted to allow the ship and its crew to survive the estimated 6 solar months of travel unscathed. Most of the ship was crafted from salvaged materials, all of which had suffered from some level of corrosion due to the oxygen and humidity-rich surface on which the Ark had landed, or had been freshly forged from far more common ores with lesser strength. The Nitos expedition was led by the Forge Domini of the Zau-Arkad's primary Forge Fane, who would personally command and maintain the ship while en route to Nitos. The launch of the Nitos Explorer vessel, whose name was unrecorded or was perhaps purged from the official records, was declared a major success. Across the Zau-Arkad's lunar colonies, those servile workers chosen to be part of the expedition were celebrated as blessed in the sight of the machine god. Many festivities were organized as the vessel departed on its voyage. For the first 3 solar months of its trip, everything went according to plan. But about halfway to their intended goal, the rear of the vessel was struck by a meteorite no more than 2 centimeters in diameter. Weakened by the corrosive effects of Zau-Arkad's atmosphere, the hull proved incapable of withstanding such a minor strike, and the impact initiated a chain reaction of ruptures that led to an explosive decompression of the vessel's interior, exposing the colonists to the fatal vacuum of the void. In a matter of a few solar minutes, Zau-Arkad's great venture had turned to a disaster. The loss of Nitos' explorer vessel was the first great crisis encountered by the Forge Fanes of Zau-Arkad, and many were those who secretly blamed the Supreme Domini for it. Fearing the adverse effects that the news of this tragic accident might have on the servile worker caste, which severely outnumbered the Magi, the loss of the expeditionary vessel was deliberately kept secret for fear the heavily indoctrinated and religious workers might see the vessel's loss as an ill omen, or even worse, the judgment of the machine god upon their masters. Still in need of new resources for its planned expansion, Zau-Arkad turned its attention to mining the asteroid field, far less rich than Nitos had been, but closer and more readily accessible. However, the cruel hand of fate was not quite done with Zau-Arkad, or as the ancient Terran proverb says, disasters never come alone. Shortly after the Nitos disaster, the Zau system was increasingly plagued by immaterial turbulence and warp storms, the like of which had stranded the Mechanicum arc on Zau-Arkad in the first place. Strange events grew widespread among the lunar colonies. from otherwise harmless strange glowing lights or auras that haunted the tunnels and caverns of the deep forge veins and the lunar mines, to infrequent occurrences of warp entity possession or sudden insanity. Most affected were those of the worker caste who unknowingly manifested the Psyker gift, becoming suddenly aware of the emergence of Psykers in their midst. The Magi of Zoarkad, and especially those of the Imnari Forge Vein, began to see them as an interesting new research subject, but would not yet act upon it. This would soon change, for with the warp storms came the first predations of Xeno Corsairs, believed to belong to the Eldar race. The Corsairs' attention was drawn to the lunar colonies and the void stations established in the asteroid belt, but curiously never touched Zoarkad itself. However, the Magi knew that they could not survive without their workers and the resources they generated, and fiercely sought to protect these from the Corsairs' baleful attention. The Supreme Domini declared that all efforts should now be concentrated on the defense of the Servial colonies and off-world outposts. This edict is known to have bred particular discontent amongst the Forge Veins, as the central authority of the Supreme Domini began to assert itself and require ever greater portions of the Forge Veins' wealth and resources to be directed to military needs. Soon discontent voices began to murmur that the Xeno's deprivation was a visual sign that the Omnissiah had turned his gaze from the Supreme Domini for his failures. It was during these years of continued militarization of the Forge World's production that the Iminari Forge Vein grew to prominence. All over Zoarkad, some few Forge Veins had begun to apply reclamation protocols to the gears and bodies of their enemies, all with the tactical approval of the Supreme Domini, who believed that at the end, the survival of the Forge World would justify the means. As such, Xeno weaponry and materials were soon given new purpose by strengthening Zoarkad's ever-growing arsenal, a practice that would justly be considered as a perversion of the sacred design of the Omnissiah on every other Mechanicum Forge world. This was, however, not enough for the Iminari, who chose to tread down an even darker path. Petition by Magos Tacticus Proctor of the Iminari Forge Vein, the Supreme Domini allowed the Forge Vein to requisition and experiment on the emergent Psyker population of the lunar colonies. The Magos Proctor's goal was to replicate the precognitive skills some of the Psykers had manifested, thus greatly increasing the potency of Zoarkad's defenses. While replication naturally proved difficult to achieve, some measure of success was met by augmenting the cerebral cortexes of battle automatons with a synthetic, mapped neural network and harvested cortical material, which increased the automaton's responsiveness and seemed to grant near precognitive levels of response time to threat stimuli. The fact that such techno-arcana had long been prescribed by the Mechanicum since the fall of the Old Knight seemed not to have hindered the Iminari Forge in pursuing its researches and standing as a testimony to the extreme deviation in doctrine that had occurred on the isolated Forge world. Properly impressed with the abilities of these new cybernetic cortexes, the Supreme Domini declared that each colony would be provided with these Iminari hybrid battle automatons, as well as the base combat models assembled in the Chiari Forge Veins, while other Forge Veins contributed in other ways to the defense of Arcada 1, 2, and 3, be it through the production of static gun emplacements, fortifications, or simple ammunition. An immediate decrease in damage inflicted and servial casualties caused was recorded in the raids of the Xeno's Corsairs, making the Zoarkad's defensive project as a great success for all of the Forge Veins involved. Yet other Forge Veins found that disproportionate attention was laid on the efforts of the Chiari and the Iminari Forges, with some even openly talking of favoritism from the Supreme Domini. This talk only masked the growing tension between these favored Forge Veins and other forges of Zoarkad. Even as Zoarkad was forced to constantly face Xenos raids and other harrowing, otherworldly incursions, the Forge world began to tear itself apart in the interscene conflict that was later known as the Chiari Wars. and that's the lore on the Forge Worlds of the Imperium of Man. Now, I'm probably going to continue to cover this topic because there are more Forge Worlds to talk about, but hopefully by putting all of these into this really long video, YouTube, or at least the YouTube algorithm, promotes this video. You could also help out by hitting the like button, sharing, and commenting down in the comment section below. This is just so that everybody kind of gets a feel for what a Forge World is, and hopefully if anybody's interested in the Adeptus Mechanicus, so like if you have a friend who's interested in playing Skitarii, hopefully this video is helpful and it could reach them more so than, you know, the standalone videos that exist out there where they're very specific. They kind of have to know the name of the Forge World in order for this video to pop up on their feed. But this way, if you type in Adeptus Mechanicus, boom, you have this hour-long video chock full of lore that can help you guys out. And like I said in the beginning, happy holidays to you guys. I know it's probably not going to be Christmas when this goes out, but very, very soon. So thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you guys are enjoying the holiday break and getting some work done. But I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. This is Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate signing out.
Always used to put my freedom first in any situation.